I thought it would be very appropriate today on Super Bowl Sunday. I know many of y'all are still watching the game. Not that I'm into such things, but you know, my loved ones and people that are close to me, and people around my little circle, are talking about the Super Bowl. So of course I'm aware of it. I thought it would be appropriate to share with you just how the societies in which we live use our talents for their benefit. The cultures in which we live use our talents for their benefit. So if you look at the talented black people that are playing on these football and basketball teams, or you find them in the boxing ring or in the UFC, or wherever you find black people in their greatness, yes, they're getting some kickbacks from using their talents. Yes, they're going to benefit financially and materially from lending their talents to their oppressor. But it's not going to affect, to any large degree, black people. It's not going to affect the masses of black people's lives. For the masses of black people are still poor. They're still marginalized. They're still unemployed, if you think that's a good thing. They're still living on the fringes of society, and wherever you find the black-white dynamic, as Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad has taught us, you'll find the white man and the white woman on the top and the black man and the black woman on the bottom. So my loved one today told me, or asked me, if I was aware that the CEO of McDonald's was black. And I said, yes, I'm aware of that. Not that that's a good thing. The question is, who's the owner of McDonald's? Not who's running the company, but who owns the company. That's like saying, what do you think about Barack Obama? Well, we're not talking about who's presiding, which is what the president does, who's presiding over white supremacy. We're talking about who controls white supremacy. So you'll find that the CEO of McDonald's is working in the interest of McDonald's, and the President of the United States of America is working in the interest of white supremacy, because we know that the United States of America is the capital of white supremacy in the world. But I want to show you this clip because Brother Harry Jones, who is the curator of the African American Civil War Memorial and Museum, he does a good job pointing out how good soldiers or good athletes made good soldiers during the Civil War. And in the Civil War, it was black people fighting to free themselves and not somebody fighting to free black people. So black people fought to free themselves from that chapter of slavery here in the hills of North America. Without further ado, Brother Harry Jones.
The South was falsifying and suppressing the history of African American contributions in the Civil War because they were ashamed that they had fought to perpetuate human slavery. He also writes that the North was falsifying and suppressing the story because they were ashamed. They had to call in the black men to save the Union, abolish slavery, and establish democracy. And what we still see today in the way the story is presented is really kind of a marginalization of the military contribution of African Americans. And one example I'll just give is, let's take the massacre at Fort Pillow. If you discuss the massacre of Fort Pillow and you're going to have a holistic view of what this really meant in the Civil War, then you must discuss the retribution by African American soldiers. In his book, The Great Conspiracy, General John Alexander Logan would write, quote, "The crime with which our Union black soldiers went into battle, remember Fort Pillow, inspired them to deeds of valor and struck with fear the hearts of the enemy. On many a bloody field, Fort Pillow was avenged." Close quote. Now, you rarely get the story of this being avenged. You just get Fort Pillow, as though that April 12, 1864, that's the end of the story. No, it's not. That's the beginning of the story. And we must tell a more holistic story. We must tell the story of these African-American soldiers. I often use athletic or football analogies to talk about them. Indeed, Woody Hayes would once say that the reason he was the coach of Ohio State, the legendary coach of Ohio State, the reason he was such a Civil War buff was because what it took to make a good football player was what it took to make a good soldier in the Civil War. Now, I accept that. I embrace that. In fact, I would say that one of Woody Hayes' peers, Jake Gaither, the legendary coach of Florida A&M, would say that I want my boys mobile, hostile, and agile. Well, that's what I want a soldier to be. I want him to be just like that. And indeed, just like African Americans make good football players, they made good soldiers. They were outstanding from the beginning. And we need to tell that story. We need to tell the story of how the generals actually are amazed at how competent they are. General Benjamin Butler, he would write, quote, "I observed a very remarkable trait about them. They learned to handle arms and to march more easily than intelligent white men. My drill master could teach a regiment of Negroes that much more of the art of war sooner than he could have taught the same number of students from Harvard or Yale," close quote. In other words, at that time, Grambling could have beat Harvard. They are outstanding, but we tend not to tell that story. In fact, often the narrative you hear is more what I'm going to call a propagandized narrative. The Negro not knowing his left foot from his right foot. He was an ignorant slave and he showed up and he had to be taught. Well, he did have to be taught. You always have to be taught in the military arts. However, there was training that went on beforehand. And we need to talk about that training. How did they show up and Butler say things like, better soldiers never shouldered a musket? They learned to handle arms so easily. Why is he saying that? What's going on in South Carolina when Thomas Wentworth Higginson talks about how they master the most complicated drill movements quicker than he's seen anyone do it? In the movie Glory, you may have seen soldiers that didn't know their left foot from their right foot, but if you read Robert Gould Shaw's actual letters, he said there are many that came to camp well drilled. And they become my leading sergeants, so no Irish drill sergeant, you can throw that out of your head. They were African-American drill sergeants with the 54th Massachusetts. This story is still suppressed in the North and in the South. So we're getting counter-narratives to the truth, I think, in both places.